Well, good morning, everyone, or possibly good evening. Maybe good evening is not even correct. Maybe it's good middle of the night, wherever you are. But thank you so much for joining us, and kia ora to our New Zealand friends. So thank you for joining us for this exciting panel session on Get Set for the 2032 Olympics and Paralympic Games, leveraging the long-term opportunities of mega events. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yugara people as traditional owners of the lands in which I am today, and I acknowledge their custodianship of these lands. I pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. I also extend that respect to traditional owners and First Nations people who may be joining us from other countries this morning. So it's a very exciting time for Brisbane and Queensland, sorry. The Olympics offers huge opportunities, but we have to, not take it for granted. I think it's very important that we learn and we think and we plan in advance. We learn from the mistakes perhaps that have been made in other areas. We learn from how to do things well from some of those really great cities that have had the most fabulous events that we've all enjoyed. Now, any of you who were able to attend yesterday's panel will know that Jimmy will be creating a graphic representation of our discussions. The visual that was created yesterday was absolutely awesome, and hopefully today's will be equally so. I will check in with him later to see how he's going and let you share the development of the graphic. And then towards the end of the session, I'll turn it over to him to give us a rundown of what he's taken away from today's discussion. So it's my pleasure now to introduce today's panel to you, and very excited to have such an eminent panel. Now, our first speaker is Daniel Gschwind. Now, Daniel, I think, will be well known to many of you, but he is the Chief Executive of the Queensland Tourism Industry Council, QTIC, and he represents QTIC on various committees and advisory boards, including the Tourism Research Advisory Board at my institution, the University of Queensland. He also is on the advisory board of the Griffiths Institute for Tourism. He's the Deputy Chair of the Australian Tourism Industry Council and the Chair of the Australian Tourism Awards. He's a member of Jobs Queensland and an adjunct professor with us at the University of Queensland Business School. He's the Honorary Consul of Switzerland for Queensland. He has an honours degree in economics from the University of Queensland and has worked as a senior economist with Queensland Treasury. And he's also previously been involved in yacht charter operations in the Mediterranean and the Caribbean. And I believe occasionally he must find some time for sleep somewhere, but I'm not quite sure where. Thank you so much for joining us, Daniel. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Judith, and welcome to all the participants of the committee and my fellow panelists here. It's a great honor and pleasure. I've participated in CORSI many years ago, a few times, and it's always been a very stimulating forum with many inspired people and inspiring people participating. So thank you for giving me the opportunity today. The announcement last year of Brisbane as the host city for the Olympics and Paralympics created enormous excitement, of course. We have now 3,817 days to go until the opening ceremony. You can check that. We're keeping a close eye on how many days we have left to get ready. And getting ready is obviously the name of the game, and that's what this session is about. When the Olympics are announced and the anticipation of it, it's always tempered a little bit by what actually are the benefits for a host city, a host destination of such an enormous event. The fears that come with that, or the concerns, are usually grouped into three areas. The fear of the cost. What cost are we taking on as a community? What are we left with in terms of infrastructure that will prove to be completely useless and a waste of time, white elephants, if you like? And what is the impact, the negative impact on the host community, the displacement, the inconvenience of the event itself, and also in the lead up to the event? So those are the fear elements, if you like. The benefits are anticipated, obviously, in tourism. Presumably, that's why I'm here today. What benefits come from leveraging an event like that for visitation, generally during, before, and after the event, and the associated service industries, of course. The other benefits that are anticipated from an event like this is the trade and the international relations boost that it can bring. And then finally, the pride of the community, the impact, the positive impact of community sentiment that an Olympics can bring. So those are the balance sheet elements, if you like, both on the negative and potentially positive side. And we have a lot of history now in Olympics, Paralympics, and similar games, and Mark will talk about the Commonwealth Games, of course. So we actually have a big laboratory set of evidence to tell us what worked and what doesn't work so well. So we're in a good position in Brisbane, in Queensland, to really address the concerns and boost the benefits. And we have more than 10 years to get there. That is an additional benefit and advantage that we have. So we have to bring that to full, make that bear to full effect on the preparation. Now, we often talk about legacy as part of the Olympic benefits, if you like, and we focus on legacies. And I want to just challenge that a little bit. The term mainly, legacy to me sounds a bit like leftovers, you know, the confetti on the floor after the party, and what can we make of that, you know, make it look pretty or something. In a sense, it sounds almost sort of, you know, like a resignation, you know, that's all we have left. So I think we should maybe use the term momentum more effectively or more appropriately, because momentum from the Olympics is something we can start now, not after the thing where we look at the legacy, but now build the momentum that comes with the Olympics from now until many, many years after, and maintaining the momentum. So to me, that's a more positive, inspired and inspiring term than maybe just legacy. And I don't want to be semantic about it or cute about it, but just to give a bit of a sense that this is now, not in 10 years and afterwards. And I think to build that momentum, the most important thing that we have to focus on is those elements of concern, of fear, and the elements of positivity and benefits. We have to align those with the aspiration of the community, the business community, and also the infrastructure needs. So that alignment is absolutely critical. We're not preparing for this for a 3-week event. That's not the point. The point is to use the momentum of the Olympic, or the boost, the confidence shot from the Olympics, to accelerate what we already aspire to. That's both in terms of tourism, our aspiration as a tourism destination, our aspiration as an international place of trade and research, education, the business side, if you like, and our aspirations as a community. The Olympics is only adding momentum. The biggest failure of Olympic Games in the past, from what I understand anyhow, is when the aspiration of the community were either ignored or completely underutilized, if you like, in the context of the Olympic Games that they had. It's a little bit, and I have to use an analogy from sailing, Judith. If you have the most beautiful yacht and ship, if you ignore the weather, the waves around you, you're not going to steer it anywhere useful. You have to, your beautiful ship being the Olympics, you have to steer it in the conditions that you find yourself in, and the conditions being the community where the Olympics will be held, namely Brisbane and Queensland. So we have to make sure we really organically grow this massive event out of this community here. We're not having the Beijing Olympics, we're not having Sochi, we're having the Brisbane, the Queensland Olympics, and we have to grow it out of that. So the Olympics, in a sense, are the cherry on top of that beautiful future that we're creating for our community. And that's how we have to approach it. And we have to, from now, and already initiatives are in place and ongoing, from now on in, we have to bring the community along, the business community, the resident community, and also the, obviously, infrastructure development. And I think that is the approach we're taking, but we must never lose sight of that, so we can achieve the community aspirations, the sustainability aspirations, the livability aspirations, the economic aspirations of this destination with this international opportunity. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you so much, Daniel. So many interesting points there. I love the idea of momentum. And I think that's a really useful concept for us to think about. Thank you. I'm going to move on to our next speaker now. So Mark, who is from, sorry, my apologies. I've got to get my stuff in front of me. So Mark has long championed Australia's profile on the international stage as a competitive sporting nation and host destination for major events. He served as CEO of the Gold Coast 2018 Commonwealth Games organising company, GoldOc, a position he accepted after leading the successful bid company. Before that, he was CEO of the Australian Sports Commission for almost 10 years, and president of the Australian Baseball Federation and executive member of the International Baseball Federation. His extensive portfolio of leadership and management experience covers tourism, events, and organisational governance and structure. He also represented and captained Australia in baseball. Mark was recently awarded a Medal of the Order of Australia in the Queen's Birthday 2020 honours for his service to sports administration, so massive congratulations for that. And in addition to his major events Gold Coast board position, Mark sits on a number of voluntary boards, including the Griffith University's Menzies Health Institute in Queensland and New Life Care Inc. And Mark was recently appointed by the Gold Coast City Council as a strategic advisor on how best to utilise opportunities for the city created by the major events. So welcome, Mark Peters. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to this session. And obviously there will be a chance to expand on what we're talking about in the questions, which is important. So a quick 5-minute overview of why we'll be successful in Brisbane and why we're successful in 18. And as Daniel said, why as Australians we are well skilled to deliver major events, whether it be in sport or it be in arts or theatre or whatever. So the key thing through the bid, and this happened with 32, and as you run a games, is you need to have your foundation strategies established. There are a number of key partners and stakeholders. There are many egos, and we'll read a lot about them in the media as we go towards 32. But the key thing is to understand the stakeholders, get agreement on what the roles are, what the responsibilities are, and who's accountable at the end of the day. And then that leads to where budget's actually allocated, which is another key discussion point as we go through. Around 2018, the state government was obviously a key player. It was about staging a successful games, inspiring our communities and having international presence. And no doubt what happened in 18, and it's been well documented, has given the IOC the confidence that Queensland and Southeast Queensland can deliver a good games. And that's based on all the foundation work and the outcomes of 2018. But the state government also wanted to see the economic benefits, wanted to see business and workforce capability develop. It wanted to see what happened in the sport area, health benefits. So we need to change the attitude of our communities, not just to be in lounge chairs watching sport, to actually get up and be physically and mentally active. And that's a key challenge for us, I guess, as we come out of the COVID area. And the last objectives for the state government was to ensure that Queensland continued to be Australia's premier tourism destination. Really interesting for me when we went out in the bid to talk to countries around the world, and we would introduce ourselves and we're from the Gold Coast, and the initial reaction was, which one? Because there are 7 or 8 Gold Coasts around the world and half of them are tourist destinations. It just reminded me that we're so lucky in Australia for what we have, but we have to keep telling the world what we have because it's a very competitive world, and Daniel's very much to the forefront of that, because we need to keep producing the images, we need to keep inspiring people as to why they want to hop on a plane for 8 hours or 25 hours to get here, which is one of our continual challenges. From a city's point of view, a lot of the same objectives: showcase the Gold Coast, elevate our city reputation, about community pride and participation that Daniel talked on. It's about the economy, creating jobs. Very much the Gold Coast was a tourism and construction bust and boom economy. What we've seen leading into 18 is the continual development of the education sector, and now the health and knowledge sector around the Griffith University Hospital. And that's why we put the village there, because we wanted to attract back of house industries to the Gold Coast. And so that's a sweeping lot of Gold Coast city objectives, which follow very much and fit hand in glove with the state government. The federal government traditionally provides money for infrastructure and essential services in the security area, in the health area, and it very much has sat at the side as a supporter and a contributor. For Brisbane, they are committing around 50% of the funds, and they want 50% of the management and administration. That is going to be fascinating. Never been done before. So it'll be interesting to sit back and watch how they do that, and perhaps we'll see a new model that will go worldwide in the way events are run. So a slight variation there. For the organising committee, and very much the international body, because the Commonwealth Games reputation took a bit of a hit in Delhi for a whole lot of reasons. Glasgow sort of brought it back to the fore as being that genuine athlete-focused games, but we needed to create something that made the Commonwealth Games special. And that was a focus. It was about attracting the best athletes, because we do have the best athletes in a number of sports, particularly in Riley's sport, and she'll talk about later on. And the quality of the track and field people we had was quite amazing. So we needed to get the best athletes. A lot of studies, again, about successful athletes go on to be successful people in business and community and all that sort of thing. So you talk to a lot of the athletes, they remember the Gold Coast. They remember the time they had, the friendliness of the volunteers and all that. And you never know how that impacts on decisions at the end of the day they may make in the roles that they have. It was also about the economic growth issues we talked about. It was about inspiring a community. There were always some people upset with some things, particularly around major events. But the skill diversification of our industries on the Gold Coast and Southeast Queensland and the development of our individual skill base sets us so well for the future. And we already have a lot of companies out of 18 that are doing work worldwide. COVID's obviously given a bit of a hit to some of them, but 32 just, again, we're ready to go in 32. So what did the games do at the end? It wasn't just another game. It's called the game of firsts, and words like inspiration and all that are used. It was a differentiation, and what we tried to set up is having the best athletes, support them, but it was also the first games there were ever equal number of medals for men and women. Quite amazing. And now we're seeing that's being picked up in all events around the world. And why not? It's about equality. It's the first serious reconciliation plan where the First Nations people were involved in their planning. And out of that came a relationship between a lot of Commonwealth countries and the Gold Coast and the Yugambeh people. And we've seen that now play out worldwide, which is those benefits that locally a lot of people don't know about, but reputationally it is big, and it's big for Queensland and it's big for the Gold Coast. And the third one was it was the biggest integrated parasport program ever in the Commonwealth Games. It's different from the Olympics and Paralympics. They're so big you have to separate them, and both are magnificent sporting events. In the Commonwealth Games you get to have the able-bodied and the athletes with a disability competing together in their program. And the support from the community was sensational. And I'm so privileged to go around and talk to people in the sporting world, and they still remember that. And we're now seeing Birmingham actually enlarge on that again. So it's about inclusivity. It's all those things you want to have as a reputation you get through sport. So quick overview, looking forward to the questions. We're really pleased with how 18 ended up in the Commonwealth Games. Brisbane will be fantastic. It will be a great event.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I'm sure it absolutely will. And very interesting. So many of the themes you touched on there, similar to what Daniel was saying around that community, the importance of taking the community along with you and making sure that what we're doing is for the community as much as it is for the international television audience. I'm going to now move on to introduce you to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Dr. Laura Misener. She's a professor in the School of Kinesiology at Western University in London, Ontario, in Canada. And her research focuses on how sport and events can be used as instruments of social change, with an emphasis particularly on how sport for persons with a disability can positively impact community accessibility and social inclusion. That touches on a lot of what we've just been saying. Her research programme is interdisciplinary in nature and pushes the traditional boundaries of her field, to emphasise the importance of critical scholarship for innovation. She also serves as a research and policy advisor to a number of disability sport organisations focused on broadening the roles of sport in positive social outcomes. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. And it's an enlightening conversation so far. And I have actually just spent the afternoon teaching a class with a guest speaker talking about Birmingham 2022. So this is really top of mind at this point in time. You know, I think there's a lot to say in terms of the potential opportunities that an event can bring. I think it's very well known in the critical scholarship that there is quite a bit of critiques over the use of public funds to support the hosting of events, and that doesn't necessarily benefit the broader community. And there are some significant concerns with that. Nonetheless, I do believe that, you know, it's been really well shown in the research that there are some potentials to really think about those opportunities in a different way. And I think with an event coming, you know, 10 years away, you have a real opportunity to start thinking about those things differently than maybe has been done in the past. I've argued before that the event creates a real catalytic opportunity to do something, to create a new outcome or new directions for the community that align with the values and beliefs that exist within that particular locale. The key issue that we have found in the past is where event organizers, host committees, local governments aren't engaging early on with local stakeholders, communities, people who really live in these communities to help the decision-making process along. Or they use the term consultation, and consultation often means asking a question but not real engagement and not real involvement in the decision-making process. So the earlier that we can start to involve the communities and the various groups who have a stake in the event itself and the outcomes of the event, the better off we are to see some positive social outcomes, things such as involvement in sport participation, which is a hotly debated item, and Mark just talked about it, and yet we have very little evidence to suggest that an event can create a positive health or physical activity legacy. And yet I do believe if we use the opportunity correctly and plan significantly in advance, working with our community members, that we can create those opportunities. And you have really strong sport community in the Australian context leading up to these games that can think about the opportunities that could be created. And as we come out of a really difficult time for sport organizations, the other thing I think they'll be thinking a lot about is accessibility and inclusion. And that's central to the work that I do, is around the opportunity that an event creates to highlight issues of accessibility and inclusion and potentially change the way that communities engage with their understanding of access to physical activity and sport participation, which goes well beyond just physical infrastructure. It's about highlighting and changing attitudes and understanding the needs of all individuals and communities, those with impairments, those with differing needs. And so the Games really creates an opportunity to have a platform. There is no other platform in the world that really showcases and highlights disability in the way a major Games can. And so to use that is a significant opportunity to create more access and inclusion to all realms of community life. And so I think that's a really important piece that needs to be embraced. And what I would say from early on is to start to think about leveraging those partnerships. It's not enough to just think about consultation and early engagement. Those partnerships need to be leveraged well beyond the Games. The important piece is to think about not only the Games itself, the 2 weeks and 4 weeks of an event, but it's about the ongoing pieces that are going to really celebrate what your community is about, create new opportunities for social participation and physical activity in community life, and really celebrate the opportunities that an event brings in terms of economic and tourism potential impacts. So the catalytic opportunity that an event creates is really the key piece. It's now going to be about how communities actually take up that challenge to move that forward in all the different sectors. And so the last thing I would say, because I think we'll have a very insightful and fruitful discussion in terms of the questions, is that it's a real responsibility on the host organizing committee and the stakeholders who are traditionally involved to think about the ways in which they engage. And Mark's comment about the work with First Nations and Indigenous communities is really relevant, because our traditional colonial understandings of engagement might not work. We need to be thinking differently about how we engage and break down those colonial barriers to engage in new and different ways if we really think that we want to have impacts more broadly in the community. And so I'd love to have more conversation to think about how we go about doing these things. So thanks.
Thank you, Laura. I'm really interested in your idea of events as a catalyst, something I've thought about occasionally in my own work. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from what's happened in other places, and hopefully, you know, maybe not repeat some of the errors that have happened in previous years. Okay, so our final panelist I'm now going to introduce you to is Riley Day. Riley is a 200-meter sprinter that has represented Australia at the Olympics, World Championships and the Commonwealth Games. Oh, Riley. Riley's goal is, as an athlete, is to medal at these respective major championships and be an influence for young children to get out there and have a go. Whilst when she's not training, she is studying a Bachelor of Business as well at Griffith University, majoring in sports management. And she's a very proud ambassador for the RSPCA and for Woolworths Supermarkets. Welcome, Riley.
Thank you for having me. I was having a think that it's 10 years to go until 2032. And I was having a think that where was I 10 years ago? It was 2012. I was 12 years old and it was London Olympics, and I was watching the TV, and Sally Pearson, who's also now a massive mentor of mine, was winning the gold medal in the 100-meter hurdles. And at that point in time, I was doing athletics and I was enjoying it, but I was only 12 years old. So I was doing it for the fun of it. And as soon as she won the gold, I was just in awe of what she achieved, and that she's from the Gold Coast. She's just an hour away from my home in Beaudesert. And I thought to myself that I can do the same. Like, if she can do it, I can do it. I can just put myself, do the hard work and go out there and achieve whatever I wanted to achieve. And I think now that we're at the same point in time as 10 years ago to now, and to Tokyo was my goal for the Olympics. It was 2016, I was 16, it was a bit out of reach at that point. But I think now is the time to inspire the next generation of young athletes, 12 to 15-year-olds, because they'll be 22, 25 when it's 2032, and they could be aspiring to get the gold medal. Because imagine getting a gold medal in front of Brisbane, the whole of Australia. It's just been incredible, because I think it's now we have to start at grassroots level and build development programs, because nowadays it's just kids are getting caught up in different things in life, and that's totally fine. But 12 to 15-year-olds, they drop out of sport. But I think there needs to be some sort of development program to keep them going and to keep them working towards a bigger goal of 2032, which is, it doesn't really happen very often. I was privileged enough to be in the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, and that was my first major international meet or multi-sport meet, and it was everything that I wanted and more. And I went out there and everyone knew my name, and I was just in awe. And I think if we sort of bring that message out to younger athletes, and you can do this now, but you just got to keep working towards the bigger goal of being in front of everyone that you know watching you at the Olympics. But it's not just about sport, which is, I know it is a big, Olympics is sport, but the community benefits greatly from the Olympics. There's job opportunities for thousands and thousands of local community members, and there's infrastructure going up, so that builds more for the tradies and the developers and the engineers and everything like that, and the local businesses. When the 2032 comes around, that there's going to be millions of people here that wouldn't normally come here, and they're just going to boom at that point in time. And I think for us to grow as a nation as well, we need to utilize our Indigenous culture, how we did for the Commonwealth Games. And I feel like that really helped us spread the word of how we all started as a nation, and so we can keep building on that for the next 10 years to go towards 2032. And it could be this massive feature of our games, because that is who we are and that is how Australia started. So I think there is a lot of different points of the Brisbane Olympics coming here, and I'm really excited about it. I think the athletes now that are competing at a high level, they're excited for it. They might be with kids at that point in time, but I remember with a few months, well, I was about a month old at that point, but when it was Sydney 2000, that the energy in the air of like the Olympics coming to Australia, it was incredible. So I can only imagine what it'll be like in the next 10 years.
Thank you, Riley. We're all very excited too. I think what I took from what you were saying there was that similar themes that has come out actually across all of our speakers, which is around the potential for an inspiring nature from the games and the potential for really great things, but that the importance of bearing in mind community participation at the grassroots level, and also community consultation and really engaging properly, as Laura said. I thought what we might do now is we might just briefly throw over to Jimmy, who is going to hopefully be able to give us a little bit of an update in terms of how the artwork is progressing, which I'm looking forward to because it's always great fun. So Jimmy, how are we going?
Sorry, just sharing across now, Judith, so I won't be a second.
No worries. Oh, look, community in big writing. That is awesome. That is just great. Yep, steering the ship. That's a lovely metaphor. That was a really nice one. Daniel, you're doing well with your metaphors, Daniel. Excellent. So thank you so much, Jimmy. I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops as we go forward.
Thank you.
So what I might do now is start looking at the questions. Now, there are rather a lot of questions in this chat. So let us see how we go getting through them. So the first question I'm going to ask, and I will ask this, of course, to everyone who feels like answering, but it might be one for either Mark or Daniel, I suspect. Given that the Olympics will likely navigate its momentum across at least 3 election cycles, how should we undertake longitudinal research in a sustained way? So how can universities get involved over the election cycles?
Look, I mean, I don't think the election cycle should be of any concern to the university research. And I'd like to think, we live in hope that politicians also can see that this time period is way beyond an individual's political life, probably. And certainly when we talk about that legacy after the games, this is about the community, not about individual politicians. And I'd like to think that they generally get that. Mark experienced that through the Com Games, of course, and there were some political ruptions through that time. But I think we all see the bigger picture, and I'm optimistic, and certainly universities shouldn't get distracted by it. Thanks,
Daniel. Anything to add to that one, Mark?
Yeah, I think the universities have an important role leading into the games. A lot of the research over the years has been the benefits will start very soon leading into the games and for 10 years after. And I've seen the phrase caused already. It's 20 years of opportunity. The next 10, and then we just enjoy the games time. And then it's the 10 years after that we really need to make the most out of by setting everything up. And the universities, that research is so key. And often it's left till late. It's often left till after the games, as long as someone's got any money. But I'm sure the IOC and the organising committee will have this as a priority because it's about relevancy of the games and we need to keep talking about that.
Thanks, Mark. On this, a similar topic, actually, Kirsten Holmes has a question, a sort of a question and a suggestion. So Kirsten says that previous Olympic Games and other mega events have resulted in more or less a bun fight amongst researchers trying to get access to data. So in London 2012 established a structure to coordinate and encourage complementary research in the Games. It was called Podium. And would it make sense to do something similar for Brisbane? And is this something that Coffee could be involved in? I don't know, Mark, if you've got any thoughts on how your collaboration with universities worked in terms of the Com Games?
Yeah, it was interesting. we actually had Griffiths University as one of our tier 1 partners. And so they had the right on a lot of these research areas and all that. Also, we developed internships. So normally students, and Riley may have experienced this, that are doing pracs are handing water bottles out at marathons and stuff like that. But Griffiths changed their curriculum. So leading into the games, there were 3-month placements, and they were placed in real jobs, in real opportunities. And so they're the experience side of it. Research is driven by who has the money. And I have no doubt, as I said before, the IAC and the organising committee will establish something and open it up to all universities. We were a little different because regional cities don't have the access to big companies and sponsorship. So Griffiths played a really big role for us in supporting the game. So yeah, those ideas have worked. And so they will be pursued, and we're all looking forward to the organising committee being established. And I've got no doubt it will be an initiative they put in place.
Great, thanks, Mark. Laura, in your experience in Canada with the various Olympics and other mega events you've had, has there been any sort of concerted efforts to engage with researchers, or has it been quite piecemeal?
It's been a bit piecemeal, to be fair, but we have a very strong initiative from the Sport Participation Research Initiatives, which is supported by Sport Canada and funded in conjunction with the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. And you have a similar framework in Australia. And so that's been a really wonderful opportunity to engage researchers in these opportunities. So each year, then there's sort of a call out based on the topics at hand. And so this would be an opportunity to do such a thing and ensure that it is an open and fair process for all researchers to engage in that. I think I have significant concerns about when an event is partnering with a single university and the knowledge capital associated with that and the protection of the relevancy of that knowledge. So I think that there are some real opportunities to create partnerships that will open up fair opportunities and equitable opportunities for researchers to support what's happening with the games.
Thanks, Laura. That's really helpful, and I think something that COTHI could look at playing a role in, because we are already a fairly large grouping of researchers. So I think that that would make a lot of sense. The next question I have is from Dennis Tolka. Looking at past Olympic Games, which one do panelists consider to be good role models for Brisbane 2032, and why? Who would like to have a go? Daniel, you're unmuted, so I might just pick on you.
Accidentally, sorry. Look, I think there are bits and pieces we can learn both in what not to do and what to do from past Olympics. Often Barcelona is cited as one of the most successful games in terms of those infrastructure issues and not completely sidelining the community. So there's probably a bit of learning from there. Also, London, I'm sure, has done many things very well. But look, I think we have to develop our own model. And I can see another question there from Jonathan Skinner, related, if you like. How do we make sure that the games don't ignore the community and the aspirations? That's what I was trying to say before. We have to really make sure that this is a custom built. This is for us. And like all other things in tourism, you cannot stray from the authentic core of what you are or what you want to be. You have to stick with that. We can't pretend. This isn't a Photoshop, Instagram shot that we're taking for the world. This is us showcasing our core, and that core inevitably must include the community and all that. And the First Nations people, as a few people said, but the community at large. Everybody must be able to see themselves in this picture. That's what we have to achieve. We don't want outsiders in this. Whether you're a kid, like Riley talked about, with sporting aspirations, or whether you're a long-term resident, living in the suburbs somewhere, you want to understand, how do you fit into this? And how does this glow from the Olympics shine on you? That's what we have to achieve. And that means we have to engage everybody, not just in the organizing of the games, but in the creating an ecosystem for the games right now. That's what we have to do.
Thanks, Daniel. Riley, from an athlete's point of view, are there any particular Olympic Games or Con Games or mega events that you think would be just awesome if we could replicate in Brisbane?
I definitely think, based on what they've done now, like post the Olympics, London 2012 have really utilised their facilities and continued to build a community around the stadiums and everything that they built in the games. So I think profiting from the city, London did really well in that aspect. But I think there is we need to completely make it our own and not completely copy another games. We need to learn from each different games and make it the best one that we've ever seen so far. And I definitely think we can, just learning from past cities' mistakes and building on it, but making it completely unique to us.
Great, thank you. Did anyone else want to comment on that, Mark?
Yeah, perhaps a quick comment. The IOC has a process set up, which is a transfer of knowledge process. So all of the previous hosting games contribute to the lessons learned, and that will be available to the organising committee for Brisbane. The other interesting point is, and a bit like Riley said, this is a chance for us to create a model, because this is a Southeast Queensland model. Although it's Brisbane 2032, the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast, and Brisbane will be hosting events. The promise that I see come out is one of the main benefits at the end of the day is we're going to have a transport system in Southeast Queensland that actually works. So there are already some very bold statements and ambitions put out there that are unique to an Olympic Games. And so I think we have that opportunity to create a new model, and credit to the IOC and the way they've done it, which could be used through other countries and see more bids in the future.
Thanks, Mark. It would be great to have the literature calling it the Brisbane model or the Queensland model. The next question actually relates a little bit to what we've been talking about there around infrastructure. So from Rick Bunning, given COVID has almost entirely removed in-person spectators at the Olympics, do we even need to build large-scale spectator-focused venues that communities cannot sustain after the Games? Mark, I might ask you about that one just because you've got some experience on the post-use of the venues for the Commonwealth Games.
It's absolutely front of mind. The white elephant term's used a lot. Again, around 18, it was all about building community facilities that if we had to create a bigger crowd, we put temporary seats in. And there's not one facility that isn't highly used by the community. And the initial planning coming out of Brisbane 32 is along the same lines. So for the sports that are on the Gold Coast in the Olympics and Paralympics, they're either using our existing facilities from 18 or their temporary facilities. So that's front of mind for everyone. The question is the costs now as against when they build, or 7 or 8 years' time. Not often publicised, but we actually gave money back to the government. So a lot of that, yeah, so we don't talk about it a lot because people ask, where did that money go? So we don't get into politics. But basically, that was about doing tenders for facilities well before the Games, and then looking at the economic climate as to when you build them. And, you know, we've got challenges now in the economy about lack of building materials and all that, the amount of building that needs to be done leading into 32. So they're the challenges that will be met, but they're sort of part of the whole planning process. But shorter answer is no white elephants. That's front of mind of every organiser now.
And Judith, can I just say, I mean, Mark and his organisation have been exceptionally successful in achieving precisely that. And I have no doubt that Brisbane will follow that pattern. All early indications are that. But what I wanted to add to this answer is that don't underestimate the desire of people to be in real places and, you know, come together. If COVID has taught us anything, I think we're all over the Zoom. We're on a Zoom now. I think everybody on this Zoom would probably prefer to be down the road at the convention centre and have all this opportunity to interact and feel it, hear it, smell it. You know, that's what we want. And everything that we do currently here unrelated to sport, every event we put on, we have record numbers. We sell out everything, every conference, every event we host, record numbers. Any opportunity, people are desperate to get back out there and get into a venue, get to an event, and actually get close to people. So, and don't underestimate how that trend will go.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, really important point that. Can we move on to a question from Phoebe now? So Phoebe Everingham, thanks for the great presentations. How do we ensure that diverse stakeholders are listened to? I might just ask you about that one, Laura. What's your advice for ensuring that a diversity of opinions are heard?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And, I think that's a question that has to be thrown back to the organizing committee and how they structure, whether they have a separate organization that supports with the social leveraging or the legacy planning, and ensuring that individuals, groups and different groups with those unique interests are part of the process. I think there has to be accountabilities associated with that. The question always becomes, though, when we host an Olympic Games, is accountable to whom? I think the only real answer to that is accountable to the local community and local community interests. And so, no, we're not going to be able to please everyone. Not everyone is going to love every aspect of what the games bring and what they're about. But being inclusive and ensuring from the start, not later on, not when we figure out what we might want to do and then we bring the voices in, but from the very beginning, involving a variety and a diverse set of voices in those conversations. And, I think you have a very strong history of doing that in the area, and Brisbane and the Gold Coast have done that in the past. And our work that we did on Commonwealth Games has demonstrated that there is those opportunities that exist. So, I don't know that there's any way to absolutely ensure it from the outside, but I would suspect that there is a clear set of values coming forward from the Brisbane Organizing Committee to ensure the diversity of voices are involved. And so just this call and this conversation here suggests to me we're starting at the right place. So it's about then the public keeping those organizing committees accountable to do the right thing and to ensure the diversity of voices.
Thanks, Laura. Mark, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you had a reconciliation action plan. So that's obviously one way of engaging with our Indigenous stakeholders. But how else did you engage with a diversity of stakeholders?
It's looking at what you're trying to achieve from the game. So if you're talking about you want to increase the city's reputation, it all comes down to what as Australians we value, and it's about diversity, it's about community. And so it's engaging, because lots of people write to you once you've won the bid about what they would like to happen. And so it's not to be frightened to engage with them, to set up that honest discussion. I remember when I first met with the Jugendbeer representatives, because it's a bit nerve-wracking. You don't want to say the wrong thing, and that's just a normal reaction. And they just said to me, Mark, just be honest with us and have a dialogue. And there's diversity within diversity. So not everyone agrees within those environments as well. So yeah, you're just bold. You do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's about community, and the benefits will come from that. And then hopefully you want often government agencies to pick those issues up post the event you have and drive them. And the credit to the Queensland government around the reconciliation plan, they actually put funding in so that Jugendbeer language group could form together in a legal entity and drive the issues into the future. And that's what you want to see. And that's the most important thing. It's not smiles and recognition at an event, it's what happens post it.
And Judith, we are such a consciously and successful multicultural society here, beyond First Nations as well. We have a third of the people here are born overseas, including a third of the panel, I suspect. We can really make this work to our advantage. There's nothing like dual citizens or people of different cultural backgrounds taking some pride, in their new home and sharing, wanting to share that and wanting to be engaged in that communication and that liaison with overseas visitors potentially. So I think we can really make this work. I guess like in Canada, Laura, as well, a similar sort of setup, cultural setup. I think that's where we have a really big advantage over some other host cities.
I think the other issue is thinking about the model of engagement. And I mentioned that, and we talk about engaging with Indigenous populations here in Canada. Certainly, you know, that model looks very different, and timelines and scale of how we engage is very different. So I think that's a step, you know, that's a starting point. And Mark's pointing out the fact that, you know, having a reconciliation plan is a starting point to be able to say, we are willing to engage on your terms, not on our terms, on your terms. And that's a very different approach to ensuring diversity. And so it's the step in the right direction to ensure a better diverse representation.
And can I further add to the First Nations thing? We've had over the last 10 years in my organization here worked on a project that has now culminated finally earlier this year, in the setting up of a First Nations Tourism Council, a sort of a mirror organization to our own. And the entire process was not directed by me or by us, it was directed by Indigenous people for Indigenous people. And that has now come to fruition. And I'd like to think that they will play a role in that from a tourism perspective. And Laura, you hinted at some of this before, you know, it wasn't a case of us telling Indigenous people what they should be doing and how they should engage with us to be heard. You know, it was creating a bit of space for us to learn how they wanted to engage and how they thought they wanted to bring together their community for that engagement purpose. You know, it's harder than it sounds, and I'm sure we all have this experience. You know, you always want to kind of teach people things. You know, we have to listen sometimes, and that's certainly what we try to do in this case.
Thanks all. Some really interesting discussion there. I'm just going to move on to a different topic now. So from Matthew O'Donnell, a major issue for many at the moment is housing affordability. And many locals see the Games as an added price pressure from this exposure, amongst others. Being a local, I'm seeing the Games creating some negative community sentiment. Any ideas as to any ideas when it comes to engaging with the community and how to navigate this issue? Mark, was there a significant house prices increases associated with staging the Com Games?
Not so much directly at games time, but it's a challenge for the Gold Coast where we have, you know, a projected population over 1 million around 2040. We have limited land space, so it'll go upwards. We have a really strong tourism industry that pays salaries that at the moment some people can't afford to live on the coast to do the jobs in hospitality. So it's a big challenge for the city, not around events, but just generally. So it's probably one of those topics where it's a topic of life, not a topic of an event. And you know, issues like homelessness and that come up at events time, and sadly they're real, and you can put the experts in place to help the messaging you have as an organising committee, but you can't solve those problems as an organising committee. So you've got to have the structures of government and private sector built around you.
Yeah, look, Matthew I agree with the question that Matthew puts. You know, I think that is a genuine problem, but is way beyond, as Mark says, beyond the Olympics. And look, but we can use the Olympics as a trigger, as a reminder, if you like, to do something about these issues, to be more motivated. It's like, you know, when you clean up your own house, if you know there's a bunch of guests coming to your house, you go all out, presenting your house from the best possible angle. And maybe that's how we should look at this and say, look, if we have the world coming around, you know, we want to make sure our social housing, our homelessness, and all these issues are actually properly addressed. It's a trigger.
Thank you, Daniel. That takes us back to what Laura said earlier about the events potentially being a catalyst for a number of different things, and perhaps, you know, sort of some of these social issues as well. We won't have too much time, but a couple of questions if we can get through them. One from One from David Coffey. Has the pandemic developed new ways of managing the Games in reducing risk factors to gain maximum success? I don't know if that's anything that anyone on the panel wants to have a go at, since you're not all currently, well, actually, Mark, you might be organising events at the moment, but I know that the rest of us aren't.
I think every day we're learning lessons. I think from the Winter Olympics in Beijing, it will be fascinating to talk to the athletes about their experiences, because foremost, the games are about the athletes, and we need to honour their dedication and create the best environment possible. But that's when we want crowds. We want people cheering. We want to be safe. So, in a lot of games, it's been the security issue that's been the biggest worry and the biggest cost to us. And we've moved through that now. And that's just a norm in your planning, to be in this COVID environment. So, but again, the health experts we have and around the world are putting in place the best they can do. And sometimes, and this is a great thing about athletes are resilient. They put up with so much, from lack of funding to obstacles in their way where they're going. So we know the athletes will cope, and we know the coaches will cope, and we know the sports will be won well. It's perhaps catalyst is the new word. It's what we put around it through the experts that work in government and all that, to make sure everyone, including the community, gets to enjoy what's going to be put on.
Thanks. Riley, just from an athlete's point of view, I'm sure that the risk and security issues are not necessarily top, foremost in your mind because you're there to compete, but does it feel particularly invasive, some of the risk procedures and security procedures, or do you find it, comforting?
It was definitely a point of concern before I went over to Tokyo, because it was the first time that I'd gone overseas traveling since probably the end of 2019. And it's drastically changed throughout everything. But it's hard to say how we can manage risks, because COVID is consistently changing every day. So what could be relevant last week is different now this week. But I felt completely safe over in Tokyo. I didn't feel like there was a massive plague around us. All the athletes were just concerned for themselves. So they were protecting themselves from others. And then we were all doing the same. So none of us obviously wanted to get COVID. So we all took the appropriate measures to make sure that we all got to the start of our event. So I didn't feel endangered or anything like that going over there. My forefront was to go over there and compete. So whether it was, it's probably bad to say, but whether there was COVID, I didn't really care, because my life is athletics. So that's what I'm going to go over there and do.
Yep, as Mark says, very resilient. So we're just about out of time. And so what I'm going to do at the moment is I'm going to throw over to Jimmy to give him a chance to show us his visuals and see how we're going. And hopefully he's got some lovely graphics for us.
Thank you, Judith. I'm just sharing through now, so hopefully that'll pop up in a second. Okay, yeah, so thank you all very much for having me along to listen to the great panelists and the discussion. It was fantastic. Being a Southeast Queensland local, I'm on Gubbi Gubbi land, Sunshine Coast, but also operate out of Brisbane as well. So it's fantastic to hear about all the amazing things that are happening in the lead up to the games. As a small creative business, I've already started to see the impact of this. So having a listen to this conversation and sort of knowing that we're already kind of being involved in all this change and the way things are moving has been fantastic. Very exciting things to come, but I can see absolutely that key message of the games being a catalyst for a lot of other conversations that might sort of start to arise and pop up. I think is a great opportunity to put Brisbane on the map in a really positive way, in Queensland as well. I really love, Daniel, your analogy of the steering the ship, and I think that's a really key point to kind of bring into it. I mean, there is a lot of assessing what the outside factors are and knowing that what we're delivering takes all of that into account. So that was definitely a key one, and great to hear your perspective, Laura, from a different country, and what you can kind of see from the outside, and how that community message is really key as well. So that's my 2 cents, but thank you to all the panelists for your great great insights.
Thanks so much. That is very, very cool. It's really interesting to see that visual representation, and so it's so different. Although, you know, it's very much a representation of what we spoke about, it's just a very nice way of seeing it. So hopefully we'll be able to, sorry, I'm just getting a message. Hopefully we'll be able to share that at the end of the conference. So we're just about out of time now for the panel. So I would like to thank very much our panelists, Mark Peters, Daniel Gschwind, Riley Day, and Laura Misener, for taking the time to be with us today. To remind you that there will be a book launch this afternoon, and Daniel's launching a book at 3:30. And directly after this session, we will be moving into today's keynote by Professor Girish Pryor. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And for me, that's it. Thank you so much.